Hello, math students. Today we're going to be going over a slope and graphing tutorial, mastery test, and practice. We'll be going over how to graph lines, how to look at a line and find its equation, and lots of other fun things. But let's go ahead and get started with the tutorial. So go to slope and graphing tutorial. This is Unit 3 for Algebra 1. And I think Unit 3 for Integrated Math 1 as well. Now, what we would do here, let's go ahead and go to page 5 of the tutorial, and we'll start on this warm up here. It says, consider the functions shown on the graph. Well, actually, one of these is not a function. We learned that from last unit. Line D is not a function. But besides that, let's take a look. We want to find line what has a negative slope. So to figure out something has a negative slope, basically it has a downward trajectory from left to right. So as you go from left to right, if it's going downwards, then that's a negative slope. So as you can see, line B in this case has a negative slope because as you go left to right, it's going downwards. Line B here has the negative slope. Similarly, a line going upwards as you go from left to right has a positive slope. So that's line A. A line that is straight horizontal, so like line C, it's horizontal, that has zero slope. Basically, a slope is a measure of the steepness of the line. So if a line is perfectly straight like this, then it has no steepness, so it has zero slope. On the other hand, if it's vertical, completely vertical line, then it has what we call undefined slope. So in this case, line C has zero slope and line D has undefined slope. By the way, please follow along with all of this. I know it takes time, but I know this video is long and the other videos are long as well, but it takes time to really learn and master this stuff. So please just follow along, write down everything I write and pay attention to everything I do, and everything I tell you to write, also write that down. All right. What is the slope of a line that goes through points -2, 5 and 0, 2? So to find the slope of a line, what you can do is actually pretty simple. The slope of a line, again, the slope, I mentioned it just a second ago that the slope of a line is the measure of its steepness. So it's a ratio. The slope, which we usually denote the letter M for the slope, is a measure of the steepness of a line. So it's a ratio between its rise over run. Okay, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Rise over run. Now, how do we find the rise and run? Well, just like with any coordinate point, you have an X and a Y coordinate for each point, X and Y. Now, the X coordinate tells you horizontal movement, or where it is on the X axis horizontally. The Y coordinate tells you where you're at vertically, right? Hopefully you know that by now. Now, each of these coordinate points that I'm looking at, they each have an X coordinate and a Y coordinate. So for the first point has a X coordinate of -2 and a Y coordinate of 5. So if you were to graph that, it would be at -2 on the X, -2, and then 5 on the Y. So right here. The other point, 0, 2, 0 on the X axis and 2 on the Y axis, that puts it right here. So the line connecting these 2 points looks like this. Now let me ask you, does this one have a positive slope or a negative slope? What do you think? Well, hopefully you said negative slope because it's going downward as you go from left to right. So we know it has a negative slope. Now, how do we find it? Well, again, to find the slope, we do the rise over run. So for the rise, you look at the Y values because those are the vertical coordinate points. So to find the rise, what you can do is you subtract the Y coordinates. So in this case, 5 minus 2. Again, subtracting the y coordinates from each coordinate point. For the run, you subtract the x coordinates. So -2 minus 0. So that would be 3 over -2. That's the slope of this line. Or in other words, -3 over 2, -3/2. Now, if you have the graph, you actually don't need to use this formula, okay? This rise over run where you subtract the y's, that goes on top, subtract the x's, that goes on bottom, and then you have your slope. Of course, you can do that if you have the coordinate points, but another way you can do it is just by looking at the graph. Take a look at the graph here again. What's my rise? So I'm going from this point to this point. What's my rise? Well, I actually went down 3, right? So my rise is down 3. And then what's the run? Well, we moved over 1, 2 coordinates. So the slope is the rise over run. So simply by counting the coordinates on a coordinate plane, you can clearly see what the slope is by doing the rise over run. Again, counting the rise is the vertical movement and the run is the horizontal movement. If it's going downward, you know it's going to be a negative slope. Okay. Now let's go ahead and move along till you get to page 16 and we'll go over this. Now here we have a word problem. Mariah is completing a language arts review sheet. She estimates that it'll take her 1 minute to complete each multiple choice question and 6 minutes to complete each essay question. The equations represents the total time it takes her to complete X multiple choice questions and Y essay questions. Select the correct answer from each drop-down menu. The slope of Mariah's equation is blank. The y-intercept is blank. Okay, so there's a very important equation that you need to know to solve questions like this. Okay, and it's essentially called the slope-intercept form of a line. And it looks like this. Y equals mx plus b. Now, as we discussed earlier, the m is your slope. The m is your slope. In other words, the rise over run. The b is your y-intercept. The y-intercept. Now, we already talked a little bit about what the slope does. It tells you the steepness and direction of the line, right? If it's positive and, you know, the larger the number, the steeper it is. The y-intercept tells you where this equation would cross the y-axis. But notice my equation here. It has y equals. In other words, it's solved for y. It has y by itself. So when I see an equation like this, notice it doesn't say y equals, right? Notice it says x plus 6y equals 36. So I would like to put it into this form by getting y by itself. So the first thing we're going to do is get y by itself here. So how do we do that? Well, hopefully you remember how to solve equations like this. In this case, we want to get y by itself. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract x on both sides of the equation, giving me 6y equals, and I'm going to put the negative x in front, plus 36. Lastly, to get y by itself, we're going to divide by 6, which means you have to divide both of these terms also by 6. Remember, whatever you do on one side of the equation, you have to do the same thing on the other side of the equation. So that gives us negative x over 6. I could write that as negative 1/6 x plus 36 divided by 6 is 6. From here, we can see what's the slope. Well, our m, our slope, is whatever's next to the x. So in our case, our slope is negative 1/6. It would be going downward, down 1/6, like that. It'd be kind of a shallow slope. And our y-intercept is 6. So if I wanted to graph it, how would that look? It's easy if you have graph paper, but I'm just going to try to show you here. Well, I like to start with my y-intercept. So my y-intercept in this case is 6. Well, what does that tell me? That tells me that when I graph this line, it'll cross the y-axis at positive 6. So it would have a coordinate point right here on the y-axis at 6. So whatever this number is, that tells you your y-intercept. So that tells you where it crosses the y-axis. Then from there, I would use my slope to help me out. So from this point, I would use the slope, rise over run. So I'd go down 1 over 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So from the y-intercept, down 1 over 6. And so I know my line will look like this. And if you're unsure, you can go on Desmos. They have a really nice graphing calculator to show you that. So I can show you that here as well. So if you have Desmos open on another tab, it's really great for graphing graphing any equation really. -1/6 x, and then it's +6. Notice here, it's the same graph that I showed you earlier. It has a y-intercept of 6, crosses the y-axis at 6. Then you go down 1 over 6, down 1 over 6 to get to this coordinate point here, right? This is 6, 5. But you can see it's a downward slope, a slope of -1/6 in this case. Okay, so here, -1/6, y-intercept 6. Okay, once you're done with that, let's move along. And we're going to get a lot of practice for graphing lines. I suggest you pay close attention to all this line graphing stuff, because honestly, it's going to be an important part of Algebra 1, and it's going to be an important part of your math journey from here on out. So a couple things is getting y by itself into the y equals mx plus b form, slope-intercept form, and then graphing the line. So let's go ahead and grab our equation. Once again, we want to get it into the form y equals mx plus b. Again, this is called the slope-intercept form because m is the slope, b is the y-intercept. So the first thing you want to do is get y by itself. In this case, how would I get y by itself? Well, I need to get rid of this 2. So I'm going to go ahead and divide by 2, which means I have to divide every term in this equation also by 2. That gives me -2x plus 3. So in this case, what's our slope? Well, the slope is whatever's next to the x. So in our case, the slope is -2. Once again, it'll be downward sloping from left to right. And our y-intercept in this case is 3. So that means we would cross the y-axis at 3. Now, here we have a slope of -2. Our m, our slope, is -2. But you can think of it as -2 over 1. And a lot of times that helps me to graph it, because then I know, okay, I go down 2 over 1, down 2 over 1. Okay, because my rise is -2, so that's down 2. And then my run is 1, so I go over 1. Remember, its slope is rise over run. So let's go ahead and graph a point. We know the y-intercept is 3. So on the y-axis, I put a point at 3, right? Because my b, my y-intercept was 3. And then from there, we're going to go down 2 over 1, just like that. And you can continue in that way. From this point, down 2 over 1, down 2 over 1. Notice our points are making a perfect straight line here, okay? You can click the line tool here, click and drag, connect to those points, and you're good to go. Okay, I didn't need to draw all these points, but just so you can see that you go down 2 over 1, down 2 over 1, just using that slope to continue to find the next point. And these points should all line up to create a perfectly straight line. Okay. Join me on page 22 here. In this activity, you'll analyze a linear equation that represents a real-world situation to determine its slope and intercepts. Then you'll graph the linear equation on the coordinate plane and identify its point slope form. Read the scenario and then answer the questions that follow. Let me put unanswered on all these. We don't want the answer key. Okay, great. The 240th ninth graders, the 240 ninth graders at a high school are divided into homeroom groups of 10 or 12 students. The equation models the situation where X represents the number of 10 student groups and Y represents the number of 12 student groups. So our equation is 10X plus 12Y equals 240. Okay. Type the correct answer in each box. Use numerals instead of words. If necessary, use fraction for the fraction bar. Okay. The x-intercept is located at something, comma, 0. The y-intercept is at 0, comma, something. And the slope is something. Okay. So one way you can kind of think about this. Now, I'm going to show you a picture. So let's go ahead and if I have an X and Y axis here, and I have some line that goes through here. So maybe it looks like this. Okay. My line's not perfect, but whatever. Well, remember what this point is called? This is called the y-intercept. Remember, that's usually our b in the y equals mx plus b form, right? Slope-intercept form. So this is your y-intercept. What do you suppose we call this point? Well, this is called the x-intercept. Okay, just like a line has a y-intercept, it usually has an x-intercept. So lines usually have an x-intercept and a y-intercept. Well, notice this too, that the y-intercept is always 0, comma, and then some number. Because since it's on the y-axis, you know your x-coordinate is 0. Similarly, the x-intercept is some number, comma, 0. So for the x-intercept, the y-coordinate is guaranteed to be 0. All right. And that goes for no matter where you draw your line, right? I don't know where these intercepts are exactly. I just kind of drew whatever, but I know that for the y-intercept, the x-coordinate must be 0. And for the x-intercept, that the y-coordinate must be 0. Now, this helps me out quite a bit because if I have an equation like the one I have here, 10x plus 12y equals 240, this allows me to easily find the x-intercept and y-intercept. And let me show you. So if I want to find the x-intercept, I'm going to go ahead and make an x, y, t table here. So to find the x-intercept, I'm going to replace the y with 0. That'll tell me the x-intercept. Then to find the y-intercept, I replace the x with 0. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look here. So in order to find my x-intercept, I'm going to replace the y with 0. So that's going to be 10x plus 12 times 0 equals 240. Well, 12 times 0 is just 0. So what we have is 10x equals 240. Divide both sides by 10 to get x by itself, solving for x. X equals 24. So that tells me that my x-intercept is 24, comma, 0. So this line is going to cross the x-axis at 24. Okay. Now what about the y-intercept? Well, for the y-intercept, I replace the x with 0. So for my y-intercept, I'm going to replace the x with 0. So that's going to be 10. 10x becomes 10 times 0. Remember, if a number is right up against the variable there, that means they're multiplied. So 10x means 10 times x. Plus 12y equals 240. What's 10 times 0? Well, I hope you know that that's 0. So we have 12y equals 240. Dividing both sides by 12 to get y by itself gives us that y equals 20. So our y-intercept is 0, 20. All right. So that helps us out quite a bit. Our x-intercept was 24, 0, and our y-intercept is 0, 20. Now, how do we find the slope of the line? Well, one thing we can do, and we're actually going to need this later, if we change our equation into the form y equals mx plus b, if we change this form, then we can find the slope easily. It's whatever the coefficient for x is. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to have my 10x plus 12y equals 240, and I'm going to try to get it into the slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. Again, you're going to need to memorize this one. So let me go ahead and rewrite my equation. 10x plus 12y equals 240. My first step to help me get y by itself, again, I want to solve for y. To get y by itself, I'm going to subtract 10x. Go ahead and subtract 10x on both sides of the equation. Remember, whatever you do on one side of the equation, you always do the same thing on the other side of the equation. So we have negative 10x plus 240. Then to get y by itself, lastly, we're going to divide both sides by 12. When I divide by 12, I'm going to have to divide every term by 12, giving us y by itself. Here, negative 10 over 12, I can actually reduce that fraction, dividing both top and bottom by 2, giving us negative 5 over 6x. I hope you know how to reduce fractions. And then 240 divided by 12 is 20. Once again, we can see what was the y. What's our b in this case? Our b is 20, isn't it? And remember, the b is our y-intercept. So we already knew that though, right? See, notice up here, we already knew that the y-intercept was 20. Okay. But this just confirms that. Okay, now we can see the slope as well. It's negative 5/6. Negative 5 over 6. Just put it in just like that. Now let's go ahead and graph it. Well, there's a couple ways you can graph it. What I would do, and probably the simplest way, is since I have these coordinate points, I have the x-intercept of 24, 0, and I also have the y-intercept of 0, 20. I can just graph those 2 points and then connect those points with a straight line. So 24, 0, that's our x-intercept. And then our y-intercept was 0, 20. Let's see, we're counting by 2, 4, 6, 8. So we're counting by twos, right? So 16, 18, 20 right there. And then we could just connect those points with a straight line. And there you go. Now keep in mind, once you have 2 points, on a line, then you automatically can just create the line by just connecting those points. So all I need is 2 points and I can create the line that, that contains those points. All right. Now, one possible combination of homeroom groups is 18 groups of 10 students and 5 groups of 12 students. Considering the answers from part A and B, which equation uses this combination to represent the situation in point slope form? Okay, so the main form I mostly want you to know is this form right here, y equals mx plus b. This is y equals mx plus b. This is the main form that I want you to know. Okay, this is the form you're going to see most of the time. You're going to see a linear equation. You're going to want to put it into this form, or it's probably already given to you in that form in a lot of cases. This is your slope-intercept form. Y equals mx plus b. Why is it called the slope-intercept form? Well, because the m is right there. It's your slope. And the b is your y-intercept. Okay, so slope-intercept. All right. Now, there's another type of way we can write a linear equation. and that's called the point slope form. Okay, point slope form. What does that look like? Now, again, I want to emphasize this point slope form is not as widely used and not as important, I would say. But they still expect you to know it in this question. Okay, so this is called the point slope form. It's actually pretty easy to use once you understand it. Okay, the main thing I want you to see, notice it has M once again, right? You see M here again, right? What does M represent? Well, that represents the slope, doesn't it? And you can see that here. It's the point slope form. So it has the slope right there. That's your M once again. So that M doesn't change. That's the slope in both of those forms. That's the slope. So we already know our M. We calculated our M earlier was -6/5. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Yeah. Yeah. -6/5 is the slope. Now it has another coordinate point, they say. You had 18 groups of 10 and 5 groups of 12. So the point we're using is 18, 5. 18 groups and 5 groups. So how do we write our point slope form for this line? Well, it's going to be y minus, for the y1, that's going to be your y coordinate. So this is your y1 and this is your x1 here. So y minus the y coordinate, so y minus 5 equals the slope, so -6/5. That's our slope. And then x minus, and then you use the x coordinate here, so 18. So this is the same equation, or just a different form of the equation, basically. Okay, so that's going to be right here. Click. There we go. All right. Hope that sort of made sense. All right, now, so these are kind of the forms you need to know. Slope-intercept form, again, this is the one you're going to use the most. Y equals mx plus b. Memorize it. Point slope form, so if they give you the slope and some coordinate point, you can write the equation of a line just like that. Y minus y1 equals m, x minus x1. And then you have standard form, which is, you'll see this sometimes. The good thing about standard form is it's really good at helping you find the intercepts. You can find the x and y intercept quite quickly using the standard form. Okay, now let's go ahead and move on to the practice. And you're going to be offered, I have 10 questions here for the practice. You're going to be offered 5 of those questions and you need to get them right. So I'm just going to go over all 10 of the possible questions you can get if you follow along closely. And if you follow along closely, write down everything I write, do everything I do, I promise it'll make a lot more sense. And graphing lines is actually an extremely important part of algebra. So I suggest you know this material very well, especially knowing the y equals mx plus b, the slope-intercept form. That's why I'm repeating it 20 times. Okay, so use the drawing tool to form the correct answer to provided graph. Okay, so here we have 3y equals 2x plus 9. So the first thing I would do is I would say, well, I'm actually pretty close to getting me to y equals mx plus b, right? Slope-intercept form. So what I'm going to do is get us into that form. And the way we do that is by solving for y. So here we have 3y equals 2x plus 9. To get y by itself, we're going to divide by 3 on every term. This cancels my 3 here, so that gives us that y equals, and then we have 2/3 x. So our slope, our m, is 2/3. And then we have plus 9 divided by 3 is 3. So let's go ahead and graph it now. We always start our graph by looking at the y-intercept. So in our case, the y-intercept is 3. So I'm going to go on the y-axis. I'm going to put a point at 3. Then from there, we use the slope to help us graph the rest of this line. Now, since it's a positive slope, we know it's going to be going upwards as we go from left to right. So Using this 2/3, this is the rise over run. So from this y-intercept, we're going to rise 2, run 3. Rise 2, run 3. And you can create additional points by following that pattern. Rise 2, run 3. And these points should all line up. Okay, use the line tool and go ahead and connect these points, creating the line. Okay. What is the slope of this line? Well, it's already in the form y equals mx plus b, except instead of y, they put f of x. But we know from the last unit that f of x, you could just kind of think of that as your y. That's your output. Okay, so what's our m? Well, it's the coefficient that's right up against the x, right? Y equals mx. So our slope is 2/3. That's your m here. That's your slope. What is the slope of a line that goes through -4, 1 and 4, -5? There's a couple ways you can do this. One way is to go ahead and graph these points and then count the rise over run. The other way you can do it is by using this slope formula where we subtract the y coordinates. That gives us the rise. So in this case, that's going to be 1 minus -5. Notice I'm subtracting the y coordinates for the rise. That's your vertical. Over the run. So here we'd be -4 minus 4. One question I get sometimes is, does it matter which y coordinate I put first? Like here I put the 1 first, and then I put the -5 here. Could we have put the -5 first and then -1? Well, the answer is yes. You can do it in either way. But notice this, that the 1 and this -4 came from the same point. So whatever you decide to put first up here, you have to use from the same coordinate point and put the same thing first right there. Okay, so if you chose to put the -5 first, then you'd have to put this 4 first in the bottom. But you should get the same answer either way. Okay, 1 minus -5. That minus -5 makes that a +5. So 1 plus 5, which is 6. And then -4 minus 4 is -8. We simplify this fraction by dividing both top and bottom by 2. I can reduce by 2 here, dividing both top and bottom by 2, giving us 3 over -4 or -3/4. Okay, which graph shows an undefined slope? Remember, a vertical or a positive slope goes up as you go from left to right. A negative slope goes down as you go from left to right. And a 0 slope is straight horizontal. This has 0 slope. And if it's straight vertical, that has undefined slope. So which one has undefined slope? That's this one here. Which number best represents the slope of this line? So once again, the slope is the rise over run. So here we could just look at a couple different coordinate points, find the rise over run. Now, before we do that, let me ask you this. Do you think this line would have a positive slope or a negative slope just by looking at it? Well, I hope you can see it would have a negative slope because you're going downward as you go from left to right. So we're going to grab a couple of coordinate points. I'm going to grab this coordinate point. I can clearly see it there. And I'll grab this coordinate point. I suggest grabbing coordinate points that are on the grid lines. You know, you can see the grid lines. Pick coordinate points that are directly on the grid line so they're easy to count to, basically. So what's the slope here? Well, from this point to this point, I'm actually going to change colors. We go down 1 and then over 1, 2, 3. So my rise was actually down 1. So my rise is -1. And then I went over 3. So my run is 3. Rise over run. There you go. Word problem. The fire department is making bags to hand out during a parade. Some of the bags X will contain 3 stickers, and some of the bags Y will contain 4 stickers. I hope I get one of those 4 sticker bags. The fire department has a total of 240 stickers. The equation represents the relationship. So here we have this equation here that some bags have 3 stickers for some reason, and then some bags have 4 stickers. And in total, they have 240 stickers. Okay. Which statement is true about the graph? Okay, so here I'm noticing these points that they're talking about over here. They're all x-intercepts and y-intercepts, you see, because x-intercepts are always something comma 0, and then y-intercepts are always 0 comma something, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and create this t-chart here and figure out what would be my x-intercept. So it's going to be something comma 0. And what would be the y-intercept? The y-intercept is always 0 for the x, comma something. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and find our x-intercept first. So we're going to go ahead and replace the y with 0 to find our x-intercept. So this will be 3x plus 4 times 0 equals 240. 4 times 0 is 0. So this gives us 3x equals 240. Divide both sides by 3 to get x by itself, giving us that x equals 80. So we know our x-intercept is 80 comma 0. What about our y-intercept? So our y-intercept, we replace the x with 0. So this will be, I guess I'll write it over here. 3 times 0 plus 4y equals 240. Once again, 3 times 0 is 0. So we get 4y equals 240. And then we divide both sides by 4 in order to get y by itself. Divide by 4, y equals 60. 80 comma 0 and 0 comma 60 for our x-intercept and y-intercept. What is the slope of this equation? So in order to find the slope here, I would just get us into the slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. So my goal is to get y by itself here. So how would we do that? Well, first thing I would do is subtract 3x on both sides of the equation. That gives us 8y equals negative 3x plus 12. Then to get y by itself, last step, divide by 8, which means we divide both of these terms also by 8, giving us y equals negative 3/8 x plus 12 over 8. I can reduce that by 4, so 3 over 2. Okay, so what's our slope in this case? Well, the slope is whatever your m is. So that's the coefficient in front of the x. So our m in this case is negative 3/8. All right. Lola just received a promotion at work and now earns $18 per hour. She writes the equation y equals 18x to represent her total earnings y when she works x hours. Which graph represents her equation? Well, in this case, y equals 18x. This 18 is the slope of the line, right? Notice it's in the form y equals mx plus b, but you don't really see a plus b at all, right? It doesn't have a plus anything, which tells me something actually. That tells me my b is actually 0. So our y-intercept is 0. So automatically I can say this one's wrong and this one's wrong because both of these have a y-intercept of Well, not 0. Okay. But these two answer choices, they both have a y-intercept of 0. You can see that here. Y-intercept of 0, y-intercept of 0. Okay. Now, our slope is 18. That means you would rise 18, run 1. But with the scaling of this, it's kind of hard to tell, right? Because it's going up by 25s each step, and then it's going over by 5s on the right, on the x-axis. So that might be difficult for us to say, okay, how much is rising 18? How much is running 1? Because it won't be on the grid lines, you know? Well, one thing to kind of help us is I noticed these hours that she's working. Hours. Let's figure out how much she would make if she worked, let's say 10 hours. Okay. So if she worked 10 hours, how much would she make? Well, that'd be y equals, she earns $18 per hour times 10 hours. Okay. So that's $180. So one coordinate point that definitely should be on the correct graph would be 10 hours gives her $180. So 10, 180 should be a coordinate point on the correct line. Let's see, 10, 180. I would say that looks pretty good, right? Above 175. So this looks like the correct answer, but let me just check the other one here. 10 hours here. Here it's showing less than 125, right? Maybe 120. So this is not correct either. Okay, so it must be this one here. Hopefully that sort of made sense. What are the intercepts of this function? Okay, so here it's already in the y equals mx plus b form, slope intercept form. So the b automatically, in this case, the b is 4. That tells me the what? Well, that tells me the y-intercept. So we know our y-intercept is 4. And the y-intercept is always 0, and then the b. So 0, 4 is definitely the y-intercept. So that's a no here and a no here. So which of these is the correct x-intercept? Well, in order to find the x-intercept, one thing you could always do is just remember the x-intercept is always something, some number, 0. So I could replace the y-coordinate with 0, find the x-coordinate that results, and that'll tell me my x-intercept. So in our case, I'm going to replace f of x with 0, essentially. Remember, f of x is the same as your y, essentially, your output. So that's going to be 0 equals negative 8x plus 4. And my goal is to solve for x. So my next step here, I'm going to go ahead and subtract 4 on both sides of the equation, giving us negative 4 equals negative 8x. These cancel. To get x by itself, we're going to divide both sides by negative 8. Giving us, and we could reduce this to positive 1/2. It's positive here because of negative divided by negative, just like a negative times a negative is positive. So our x-intercept is 1/2, 0. Okay. Here we have y minus 6 equals negative x minus 4. And this is in parentheses here. Okay. Well, this one is in slope, point slope form. But I know this one is not as familiar as the slope intercept form. The y equals mx plus b, you're probably more familiar with that now at this point. So one thing we can do is always just change it into slope intercept form. Change it to y equals mx plus b. And one thing we would do first is I would actually distribute this negative into this parentheses. And when you distribute a negative, that changes the sign of every term in here. So here we'd have y minus 6 equals, and this is going to make negative x and then plus 4. That negative makes that a plus 4 there. Then to get y by itself, so that we can be in the form y equals mx plus b, we're going to go ahead and add 6. Add 6, giving us that y equals negative x plus 10. Now we can see our slope. Well, what's our slope? Well, remember, the slope is whatever's next to the x, right? So in our case, there's a -1 essentially next to the x. So whenever you see just a negative in front of the x, you can think of it as a -1 for its coefficient. So -1 is our slope. And our b in this case is 10. Another note, I just want to state this, that you may see equation that says like y equals x plus something. In this case, your slope would be 1. Okay, so you may see ones like this where your slope is 1. And remember, you could always think of this as over 1. So if our slope is -1, we can think of that as -1 over 1. So for our slope, we'd go down 1 over 1, down 1 over 1. Okay. And our b in this case is 10. So our y-intercept is 10. So our y-intercept is 10, and it goes down 1 over 1, down 1 over 1, down 1 over 1. Okay, slope of -1 there. Okay, so this one's correct here. Okay, moving on to the mastery test. I have 20 questions here. You are going to have 5 questions. I will go over at least part of each of these questions, and you're going to be given a sample of these questions. You have to get at least 4 right. I also want to say that if you found this useful, if you found this helpful, please like, comment, subscribe, and most of all, share it with someone else who may also find it useful. Okay, let's go ahead and start this first question here. This one says, select all the correct answers. So a lot of times you'll see answer choices where it has like a square boxes here. That means mark all the ones that apply. So if you ever see ones with square boxes, just know that there's probably more than one correct answer. Okay. All right. When shopping for accessories for her action camera, Giana found an advertisement for a replacement battery. The advertisement includes the given graph of a function to represent the charge remaining in the battery after streaming X hours of video. Okay, so we can see our y-intercept is 100. Our x-intercept is 8. All right, let's see. So let's see. First thing, let's not look at our equations yet. So I'm actually going to look at this one here. It says the y-intercept is 0, 120. Does that seem correct to you? The domain for this function is 0 to 12. I would say that's not correct because our domain looks correct from 0 to 8. This one says the x-intercept is 8, 0. Does that seem correct? So which of those 3 that I just showed seem correct? One of those is correct. The other 2 are not. And then let's find the equation for this. Well, there may be more than one correct answer here. Let's see. Well, for this one would have, let's go ahead and find this one would have an x-intercept of 4. Okay, so this 25x plus 2y equals 200. Let's see if this one has the correct x and y intercepts. So what we can do to find the x and y intercepts is make a t-table, right? So for our x-intercept, we replace the y with 0. For our y-intercept, we replace the x with 0. Okay, so how do we do that? And we already know our y-intercept is 100. our x-intercept is 8. So let's see. If I replace y with 0, this would be 25. X equals 200. Divide both sides by 25, giving us x equals 8. Okay, so 8 comma 0, so that seems correct to me. And then to find the y-intercept, I replace the x with 0, so that'll take this away. So that'll be 2y equals 200. Divide both sides by 2 to help me get y by itself, giving us that y is 100. So this one has a y-intercept of 0, 100. So this looks correct. Okay. Let's see, is this one correct here? No, this one's not correct because they used the point 8, 100. This thing does not go through 8, 100. And let's see, is this one correct? Well, we know that this equation is correct because we just checked it. What we can do is solve for y and see if we get this slope-intercept form. So what I would do is subtract 25 both sides. So I'll give us 2y equals negative 25x plus 200. Divide both sides by 2 to get y by itself. So that gives us y equals negative 25 halves x plus 100. So that looks correct as well. So both equations are correct. They're just in different forms. This one is not correct. And then one of these is correct. I'm going to leave that to you to figure out. Which statement is true about the slope of this graph line? So would this graph have a positive slope, a negative slope, 0 slope, or undefined slope? Well, it looks like you should know this one, I think. Give it a try. What are the x-intercept and y-intercept of this function? Well, to find, remember, this one's already in the form y equals mx plus b. And the b is your y-intercept. So what's our b in this case? So this will tell you your y-intercept. To find the x-intercept, you replace f of x, or in other words, the y, with 0, and then solve for x. Okay, so this thing will tell you the y-intercept, and then solving for x here will tell you the x-intercept. What is the slope of the line that goes through these 2 points? So to find the slope of a line when they just give you 2 points, one thing we can do is we can do the rise over run. So the rise over run, you subtract the y coordinates for the rise. So 5 minus 2, the y coordinate minus the other y coordinate. Then our denominator, we do the run. So 8 minus negative 4. Go ahead and finish solving that. That should give you your let's see. Yeah, finish solving this, and don't forget to reduce the fraction to find out which of these is correct. What is the slope of this line? So to find the slope, one thing we could do is write it into y equals mx plus b form, slope-intercept form. In other words, we need to get y by itself. And then whatever's next to the x will be your slope. So what would be my first step in solving for y? Well, my first step would be to add 3x to both sides of the equation, giving us 8y equals 3x plus 12. Go ahead and finish solving for y, and then figure out which of these is the correct slope. Charlie's Pizza charges $12 for a medium cheese pizza plus $2 for each additional topping. The cost of medium pizza y with x toppings is represented by this equation. Y equals 12 plus 2x. I'm going to actually rewrite that as y equals 2x plus 12. So what is now it's in y equals mx plus b form, right? So what is our slope? What is the y-intercept? Okay. And figure out which of these graphs shows that. Okay. A daycare charges $3 per hour for preschool aged children and $4 per hour for infants and toddlers. The equation represents the number of preschoolers, X, and infants and toddlers, Y, at the daycare center. In an hour, it earns $180. $180 in 1 hour. Okay. I'm in the wrong business. Which graph represents this relationship? So one thing we can do is find what I would do first here is, since it's in this standard form, probably the simplest way is to find your intercepts. So again, you can find the x-intercept by replacing y with 0. Then find your y-intercept by replacing x with 0. So your y-intercept, or I'll find one of these intercepts for you. So I'm going to replace the y with 0 to find the x-intercept. So it'll be 3x plus 4 times y, which I'm replacing the y with 0, equals 180. This thing goes to 0. 3x equals 180. Divide by 3 on both sides of the equation to solve for x, giving us that x equals 60. So I know my x-intercept will be 60, 0. Go ahead and find the y-intercept and figure out which of these graphs shows the correct x and y-intercept. Here, this equation is already in the form y equals mx plus b. Find the slope. I'm pretty sure you got it. Remember, f of x, you could rewrite that as y. It's the same as your output. We learned that in the last unit. Which line which number best represents the slope of this graph line? So one thing we could do is we can just look at 2 coordinate points, find the rise over run. So what's the rise? What's the run? Write it as a fraction. Now, by the way, for this line, do you think it'll have a positive slope or a negative slope? Think about that too. Which line has a y-intercept of 2 and an x-intercept of -3? So y-intercept of 2, that means it crosses the y-axis at 2. And then an x-intercept of 3 means it crosses the x-axis at -3. Okay, -3. Okay, figure out which of those graphs shows that. Consider the linear function below. Okay, we have 2 functions. We have this first function that has an x-intercept 3, 0, y-intercept of 0, 4. And then we have this other function. Here are the coordinate points for it. The slope of each function is determined which has the steeper slope. Okay. So let's go ahead and find the slope of function 1. I can use these coordinate points. Remember, to find our slope, if we have the graph, we can just count rise over run. But if we have coordinate points, you can just subtract the y coordinates, that goes on top, subtract the x coordinates, that goes on bottom. So here we could do 4 minus 0, subtracting the y coordinates here, 4 minus 0, and then 0 minus 3. So that gives us 4 over -3, or in other words, -4/3. So the slope of this function 1 is -4/3. That's the slope. For the slope of this one, you could use any 2 coordinates you like. You could use these 2 coordinates. You could use these 2 coordinates. You could even use, they don't even have to be next to each other. You could use like this coordinate and this coordinate if you like, doesn't matter. Okay, choose any 2 coordinates and find the slope just like how we did here. And then figure out, yeah, you got it from there, I think. Which function is increasing at the highest rate? In other words, we want to find the slope, the function with the largest slope. The slope tells you your rate of increase. That's another way to look at it. So we need to find which of these has the largest slope. Okay. So let's look at A. Let's go ahead and find the slope for A. To do that, I'm going to get into the form y equals mx plus b. And whatever the m is, that tells me my slope. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract 12x both sides to help me get y by itself, giving us that negative 6y equals negative 12x minus 24. Divide both sides by negative 6. When you divide by something, you divide every single term in the equation by that. So that gives us 2x. In this case, we have a slope of 2. So the steepness of this line, or in other words, its rate of increase is 2. So this one has a slope of 2. I'm going to go ahead and write that here. Let's go ahead and try function answer choice B here. We have an x-intercept of 8, so that's 8, 0, and a y-intercept of negative 4, so that's 0, negative 4. And we can go ahead and use that slope formula, subtract the y-coordinates, so negative 4 minus 0, negative 4 minus 0, and then 0 minus 8. So that gives us negative 4 over negative 8. A negative over a negative is positive, and this reduces to 1/2 because 4 is half of 8. Okay, so this one has a slope of 1/2. This one's not as steep as A. A is the steepest so far. C is automatically wrong because it has a negative slope. I can tell because it's going down. So that one's automatically wrong. And then go ahead and find the slope of line D, or answer choice D, g of x. You can use any points, any 2 points you want. So if you want to use the first 2 points, that's fine. To find the slope, here I would do negative 4 minus negative 5 over 2 minus 1. And go ahead and finish that and see if this slope is greater than A. So it's either D or A. You'll have to work this out and see if it's bigger than 2. Which of the following shows a graph of this equation? Okay. Well, this one is in point slope form. So the slope here is whatever's next to this parentheses. So in our case, our slope is 4, and it has to go through the point. Using the point slope form, I know it must go through the point 4, 6. So which graph goes through 4, 6 and also has this slope? Which of the following is a graph for this? Okay, once again, I can get it into the slope intercept form, y equals mx plus b form. And the way I do that is I want to solve for y. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually add 3x both sides of the equation. This will help me get y by itself, giving us 2y equals 3x plus 8. Divide both sides by 2 to help us get y by itself, giving us that y equals 3 over 2x. So our slope is 3 over 2. And our y-intercept, 8 divided by 2, is 4. So which graph has a slope of 3 over 2 and a y-intercept of 4? What is the slope of this? So you can use any 2 coordinate points you like. You could use, doesn't matter which 2 you choose. Maybe I'll just do this bottom 2. To find the slope, you would do the subtract the y coordinates, that goes on top. So I'm going to do -7 minus -1. So I'm subtracting the y coordinates. On the bottom, that's your run. Remember, it's rise over run. The rise, you look at the y coordinates. For the run, you look at the x coordinates. So 5 minus 2. Giving us -7 plus 1, because that negative makes it a plus. And then here we have 3. So that's -6 over 3. Go and reduce that fraction and tell me which of those is the correct slope. The number of entertainment websites in 1995 was 54. By 2004, there were 793 entertainment websites. Approximately, what was the rate of change for the number of websites for this period of time? So we want to find the rate of change. We have basically 2 coordinate points. We have 1995, comma 54. And then we have 2004, comma 793. So basically you want to find the slope here. Okay, find the slope. And so how do we find the slope? You subtract the y coordinates, that goes on top. So 793 minus 54. And then the denominator, the run, we subtract the x coordinates. Okay, I think I can count on you to finish that, figure out which is the slope. Okay, here they give us y equals, the slope is 2/5 at 2/5, and then we have a y-intercept of 2. So which of these graphs has a y-intercept of 2 and a slope of 2/5? So you'd go up 2 over 5, up 2 over 5, from one coordinate point to the next. Let's take a look at this one. Which statement is true about the graph of this function? Well, here your m is 4, so your slope is 4. And it goes through the coordinate point -1, comma -4. Let's see. None of these tells me that. So one thing we can do is we can go ahead and use some of these coordinate points to help us out. So this one says it goes through the point 1, comma -4. So that means if I replace x with 1 and y with -4, it should be equal. So I'm going to try that. -4 plus 4. Again, I'm replacing the y with the y coordinate. The y with the y coordinate here. 4 times, and I'm replacing x with the x coordinate, so 1. So here, -4 plus 4, that's 0, equals, this is 4 times 2, so that's 8. So that's not true, so that means this is not true. Let me go ahead and try the next answer choice. And I'm going to replace the x and y with 1 and 4. So replace the y with 4, the x with 1. So this will be 4 plus 4 equals 4, parentheses 1 plus 1. So this is 8, 4 plus 4 equals, and this is 4 times 2, that's also 8. So this point works, and I think this point's going to work as well. We can double check by replacing y with 8 and x with 2. So this would be 8 plus 4 equals 4, parentheses 2 plus 1. 8 plus 4 is 12 equals, this is 4 times 3, which is also 12. So since it equals in the equation, we know that those points will be on that equation. For this one, go ahead and graph the line. Here your slope is -2/3 and your y-intercept is 1. So your y-intercept is 1, so I'll put a point at 1. Then from there, you'd use the slope. So you'd go down 2 to the right 3, down 2 over 3 from your y-intercept. All right, for this one, our slope is 1/2. Okay, but one thing we could do is we can get this into slope-intercept form. So the first thing I would do is distribute this 1/2 here. So 1/2 times x, and then 1/2 times 2. So it's going to be y plus 2 on the left equals 1/2 x plus 1/2 times 2 is 1, because half of 2 is 1. Remember, to multiply a whole number times a fraction, you multiply the whole number times the top, then divide by the bottom. So 2 times 1 is 2, and then divide by 2 is 1. Then we want to get y by itself. So to get y by itself, I could subtract 2 both sides of the equation, giving us that y equals 1/2 x minus 1. Go ahead and see if you can graph this equation. Here, your y-intercept is -1, and your slope is 1/2. Okay, well, I hope that you were able to get through it. I hope it made sense. If you found this helpful and you would like to say thank you, then like, comment, subscribe, and most of all, share it with someone else who would find it useful as well. Well, with that, take care, and I'll see you guys next time.